I want to now move on to some of the trends. Okay, I'm going to talk about 6 retail trends that I think have a place in the sky. The first trend is personal, but it's not what you think. You know, personalization, we've heard that to death. You know, you can go to Starbucks, you can have your Starbucks coffee any way you want, you know, have it your way, and you can have it that way. What I'd like to talk about is the technology of recognizing the consumer, personalizing consumer interface. Now, there are several technologies that are emerging and new today that are really changing the way that brands interact with consumers. So, from the far left there, age recognition, Kraft Foods is using this. These are, by the way, all technologies that are used in retail around the world today. So, there's actually technology that reads a face and identifies the age of the consumer. And for this particular product, they're only selling Jell-O, actually, to consumers that are over 40. So if it's a young person, it doesn't actually dispense the Jell-O. It says, go away. Gender recognition. We have, actually, in Japan, they've worked out a process that's being utilized in vending machines that identifies whether it's a male or female a consumer. And then it recommends a product based on whether it's a male or female. So it's actually selecting and curating products based on that technology. Seat recognition. Mercedes-Benz has now recognizes the pattern of your seat so that you can actually, it's for security, but it's also a way of identifying the user. Now, there's all sorts of body recognition. Tomorrow, you're going to hear about eye tracking, which is wonderful technology. There's now technology that's focused on your fingerprints, your breath, your biometrics to identify the consumer and then tailor the products for that consumer. And I think the most important basic advances recently in recognition technology has been in mood recognition. So Unilever, as well as other companies, have now adopted technology that it can tell the consumer's mood. Nissan also has this in some of its vehicles. And this is pretty important because we can either play up the mood or change the consumer's mood. And this is all being used now at the point of retail to be able to cater better to the consumer. And lastly, there's even laughter recognition. This is an online technology that in Spain that's being used, and they can tell whether you're laughing, and then it reacts, the product reacts appropriately. Now, gesture recognition is in the same family, but slightly different. That's where I move my arms and I'm a human joystick. And what's happening at the point of retail, this is being used for user interface at displays. So the consumer is able to move products around or move the display around virtually by moving their hands. Kraft Foods, that's the top kiosk, is employing that, and a number of department stores throughout Europe are utilizing this technology. So I think the implication here for the airline retail industry is that this is what's happening on the ground. This kind of consumer recognition technology is taking place right now, and I'm sure we're going to see this in the air. I know that this is where there's a blur between in-flight experience and design and retail takes place, but the fact is that we need to be planning in advance for this. The second trend is the paradox of choice, or choice. I'm sure you've heard about this. There's books about it. The more choice you have, the more paralyzed one is. The consumer actually becomes more dissatisfied when they have too many options. There's science that proves this. So fewer options is actually more satisfying to a consumer. And as a result, what's happening is that retail, because there's so much choice in retail today, is actually redesigning itself. So what we're seeing is the whole retail world is turning itself upside down. And I use this as a metaphor. These are actually upside down stores. These are stores, Gap and Victor and Rolf have launched stores that are literally everything in the store is upside down. And they're doing this to stand out. They're just doing this to basically change the paradigm of retail. And similarly, there's this idea of counterintuitive. So with the paradox of choice, you want to surprise consumers with something that they're not expecting. So luxury, fast food, fast luxury. You can now buy products that are luxury products that used to be associated with slow and artisanal in a fast environment. On the go, caviar on the go, luxury items in boutique in the stores, champagne in department stores, for example. And another example in this category, this bundle of trends, is the curated selection. So the opposite of too much choice is a curated choice. And great examples, two different sides of the globe, Muji in Japan and Apple Store in New York City. They basically sell a very finite number of products, very curated selection of products, and that we're seeing that translating into consumer goods as well, as brands are being launched with limited number of ingredients. 5 ingredients for 5 ice cream from Haagen-Dazs is an example of this. So this is a trend which is the opposite of too much choice, is paring things down. The next trend I want to speak about is tiny. And here in Singapore, I used to live in Singapore, we love buffets. And I think that's largely to do with the fact that you can sample lots of different things. But we're seeing that in retail as well, with the miniaturization of stuff. Everything is being miniaturized. We're seeing, from food and beverage products to cosmetics to technologies, little samples of products. And I believe that this is because we have another trend, which is what I call mixology. Consumers want to try and mix and change up and create their own creations. So what they're doing is they're mixing their own makeup. They're mixing their own sodas for freestyle. They're mixing their own charm bracelets, and they're creating their own sneakers. And so when you provide little samples of products, you're giving the consumer the ability to create their own, if you will, creation. One line. This is my term for the blur between the online and the offline is one line. We live in a one-line world. There's no offline, online. So with that, and that's coming from the Internet of Things. Have you heard of that expression? Everything, I just came back from CES, the International Consumer Electronics Show. Everything is connected to the internet. My toaster, my car, everything is connected to the internet today and is intelligent and runs on apps. And with that, it blurs the online and offline world, and this has implications for retail. So what we're seeing is online brands are actually building bricks and mortar retail operations. We're also seeing a trend now of online shopping inside stores. So you go to the store, you check out the product, and then you go online in the store and buy the product. And so it's blurring that. And we're all familiar with augmented reality, but augmented reality now is moving. Remember I talked about recognition earlier? All those kinds of recognition. Now it's object recognition. We are now in an era where I can point my phone at an object and it recognizes the object, the perfume bottle, the Coke bottle, and then the information comes up. So we're very, very close to having that being ubiquitous in our retail environment. And then virtual reality with regard to trying on products. From Tissot to Levi's, numerous brands are allowing consumers to try on virtually their products. And this has great implications in an airline situation where you've got a captive audience. My next trend, the 5th trend, is temporality, is time. We all have a cell phone with the clock on it right now. And you've got Facebook timeline. Time and timelines have never been more prominent in our lives than they have been today. And as a result, the retail world is capitalizing on time sensitivity, time urgency. So we have pop-up stores. We have stores on wheels that move around. The idea here is that it's fleeting. It comes and it goes. And the retail then has a sense of urgency. So with that, consumers like to know that this is a limited offer, a limited product. It's seasonal. And that's why you're seeing an increase at the retail level around the world of seasonal products and brands that are being offered to capitalize on that urgency and create, if you will, a call to action for purchase. And you have countdowns. Now, I think that we have become very familiar as consumers with the countdown because we get it on eBay. You've got only 10 minutes left. And you have on home shopping networks around the world. It says the inventory is counting down. We have so many days to the holiday. So using the time situation and the time, limited time in flight could work to your advantage in a retail environment. And the final trend that I want to highlight here that's very much focused on the curious consumer is digital, but I don't mean digital the way